Live. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our COVID-19, a conversation for Mendocino County Lodging property owners and managers. We will begin in just a moment. Please note, for the first part of today's presentation, your mic will be muted and your video will be off. That is to allow the presenters to present the information, and then once we open up to questions, you can click the raise your hand icon at the bottom of your screen, and I can change your settings to unmute you or put your video on if you would like, so we can have a conversation. Again, thank you for joining us today, and a couple other notes. Please, if you're experiencing sound issues, please check to see if your volume is all the way up and your sound is on your computer. Or if you're having issues connecting, you can also join in by calling the number that is provided and entering the webinar ID that's provided in the email. Okay, and if you have any concerns or questions in the meantime, I will be monitoring the chat. Oh, I don't know if I introduced myself. My name is Amaret Quintanilla, training coordinator with the West Business Development Center. Back to the chat, if you have any questions or concerns, I will be happy to monitor them as they come in. You can also type them in the Q&A section down below. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Amaret. Good morning, everybody. We find ourselves in very challenging times for the hospitality industry here in Mendocino County and in fact around the world. This is unprecedented and unparalleled. I know many of you from my work with Visit Mendocino, where I was part of the organization for almost 10 years. And it's because of that Marianne Petrillo, CEO of West Business Development Center, reached out to me to help bridge the gap between the hospitality industry, lodging in particular, and the West Center, to be the liaison for you and other tourist-related business owners and managers. West has a lot of resources, information, and assistance that they can provide to you during this very difficult time. Their services are free, and while many of you may be familiar with West, we just wanted to make sure that all of you know what is available to you. Tourism is vital for your business and for your employees, and it's also a huge economic driver for the county itself. We can't predict the outcome of what this pandemic will bring to the tourism industry, but what we can do is provide a forum for lodging and other hospitality businesses to discuss issues, listen to your questions and concerns, and share ideas and information, and bring the industry together to unite during this particular time. Excuse me. This is our first lodging-specific webinar presentation. It's a little bit different from West's usual presentations. We'll kick off with Marianne Petrillo, who will talk about West Center, the resources that are available to you. Please remember to sign up at westcenter.org or give them a call at 707-964-7571. There are advisors available to you, and as I said, these services are free. The West Center website has a banner across the top called Doing Business in the Age of Coronavirus. That particular page on the site is updated daily, if not hourly, with vetted factual information. There's no speculation on there. This is all information that West Center has confirmed, and that is it will be of great resource to you. One of the links on there that will be valuable is the Small Business Administration Loan website link. SBA has done a tremendous job of totally revamping their site in the past few days to make the loan application process much more streamlined, much more easy to deal with. And we're already hearing that some lodging property owners have applied and are getting responses already. We do encourage you to apply for whatever resources are available to you, financial assistance. You can always turn it down if you're accepted and the time comes that you find you don't need the money, as unlikely as that sounds right now. But if you don't apply, you don't stand a chance of getting the assistance. So Marianne will go into some of that more deeply in just a moment. I've also invited 3 lodging owners and managers to speak today to share their news and information and personal experiences dealing with SBA loans, to talk about the Mendocino County Lodging Association, some information about TOT, property taxes, and other tourist-related information. And then once we've heard from the presenters, we'll open up the conversation. We do have some questions that people submitted ahead of time, so we'll go through those first and see if we can give some answers. And then we'll open it up to you to ask questions. And as we can, we'll be able to respond to those questions with answers. But until we have those questions, we can't go out and do the research. As Emmerette said, please use the raise hand icon at the bottom of your screen to ask a question, and she'll be monitoring the chat and Q&A buttons as well. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Marianne Petrillo, who is the CEO of West Business Development Center, a resource that's been in the county for more than 30 years, assisting small businesses to get started and thrive and grow. Marianne's been working tirelessly during this entire crisis to gather information and resources for the West team to share with business owners just like you. So Marianne, thank you. Marianne, your sound isn't on.
That's what I wanted to know. Hi, is this volume okay now, Alison and Emmerette? Yes. Okay, yes. Great. One of the downsides, you may have all already experienced this, is that being online and doing work from home and using technology, at any given point, some device is going to fail, either by not having it plugged in or not, losing battery. So it's always a little bit of a challenge, and you need to check these things out ahead of time. So thank you. Thanks for that introduction, Alison, and the overview of West. We're really happy to have you help us with this, and especially to help this hospitality industry in particular. There is no doubt, either on our side or really from what I've been hearing from government entities and especially from the state, that tourism is hardest hit and probably will find it the most difficult to be dealing with what's going on during this time and during the sheltering in place order. So we're going to do whatever we can to help you, to certainly make sure that you get accurate information. And, as Alison said, we're here along the way. If we don't have the direct answers now, we will do our best to find those answers and brainstorm with you around ideas that you may have that we could possibly implement, or I could share back with my colleagues and constituents. I wanted to share this particular slide, which is the local business resources in addition to West, that is open to services here because they have been in the county for a long time. So in addition to ourselves, who provides free advising and informational webinars and workshops, EDFC has been around for a long time providing loans to the business community, and the Workforce Alliance, which is really actually 4 county-wide efforts that have come together to provide service and information around retaining employees and reallocating employees to other, industries as we're seeing more and more of a need for this. So just keep in mind that all of them are here and available to you. Yes?
Could you please share your screen again? I think the slides went away.
Oh, okay. Hold on one second.
Thank you.
Let me do that. Thanks, Emirate. Well done. How about now? Is it coming up now?
It is, yes. Yes.
Great. Okay. So these are the three services that are local. What I wanted to talk to you today, and again, very briefly, because I know we have some
Marianne,
excellent.
yes? And on my end, I'm seeing, and it looks like it's not presenting. So if you want to open it into presentation mode.
Let's see. Is it coming? Hold on. I just closed it out. Let me share again. How about now? Do you see the SBA Economic Injury Disaster Loan slide?
Yes, now I do. Thank you.
Okay, great. Yeah, don't hesitate to interrupt because I don't know necessarily what you all are seeing on your end. So what I'm going to share with you today is some of the updates that are happening around disaster loans. Please keep in mind, it's a fluid situation, and I don't mean that lightly. I don't mean it in a kind of offhanded way that people don't know what's happening. There are a lot of people working on this, and and you might hear today even some of the experiences from some of our other speakers. The difference between doing an application a week ago and doing an application today is completely different, somewhat different. What was the opportunities when we first started these webinars, let's say around March 14th, the opportunities and what was in my toolkit to share with businesses is completely different than what's there today. So what that's saying to me is that tomorrow there might be something else. So we, believe me, we have put webinars and instructional information up and in 5 days taken it down because it has changed that radically. So I just say this because when we provide you information, we're really getting it from our SBA resources, and that is actually two specific areas. It's the SBDC, which is the Small Business Development Center, and it's also the Women's Business Center. Both of these are technical assistance providers under SBA. That's what our center houses, or those two centers. In addition, we get California funding through the Governor's Office of Economic Development. So we get the federal agency information and we get the state information. All of that we bring to you specifically in our website, and that was the COVID website that Alison referred to. And I could bring that up at the end of this call and walk you all through that. But just to kind of encapsulate this in an easy to understand way of what is available today, there are two forms of loans that are available. One is called the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, commonly referred to now as the EIDL. The second one is the Paycheck Payroll Program, PPP is what it's called. Both of these loans are what comes under the CARES Act. The CARES Act is the act that was signed into law on Friday, this past Friday. So these are the two loans that are currently out there and available. I'm going to touch very lightly on each one of them, and then we'll go through the whole presentation, and I'll be happy to answer questions, more specific questions about this in the Q&A portion. EIDL loan has now a new website. If you did this 10 days ago, it's been streamlined. It's much easier to get into, and they're processing it much faster. But certain things haven't changed. There's no loan fees, it's no guarantee fees, no prepayment fees. Please be mindful that there are a lot of predatory lending agencies out there, and you might not necessarily know that they're not SBA, but if anybody is trying to charge you money for doing anything, please don't use that, or come to us and we'll let you know and we'll vet it with our folks. You can get a loan up to $2 million for 30 years, and the interest rate is 3.75 with 2.75 for nonprofits. The first month payments are deferred a full year from the date of the promissory note. And there's a couple of things to keep in mind. This is an SBA loan. So it also, it's approved by SBA, and it's just based on the applicant's credit scores. There's not going to be tax returns. It's a simpler process now. Now, the most recent information is that less than $200,000 can be approved without a personal guarantee. We have also been told that if you were taking out a $25,000 loan, those get processed even faster. There is conversation and confusion around what it means to get a $10,000 emergency grant cash advance. When you go into the portal, there will be a box that you check that says, yes, I want the $10,000 advance, which will come to you quicker than any other money once you check that box. What I have been told, and I had it verified just this morning, is that if you have already applied in the old form, you need to reapply and ask for the $10,000 advance. Your old form will still go through the system, so you're not losing anything out, but they want you to reapply and make sure that you check that box so that money can come to you quicker. So there's certain little nuances about that, and that's why if you, talk to one of our advisors, they can certainly help you get through that. Now, the new loan is this Paycheck Protection Program. I'm going to get the P's rolling off my tongue easier over time. The difference of this program is that this lending program has to go through a local lender. So SBA isn't going to do it. It's going to be through local lenders. Now, we are finding out which local lenders. I mean, I'm sure places like the Savings Bank, Chase, Wells Fargo, I'm sure places like that will all be putting that up onto their sites, and you will be able to go to those places to get those loans. Again, 4% interest, loan term is up to 10 years, again, deferred payments, 6 to 12 months. The important thing on this particular loan versus the SBA is that we are encouraging you to apply for both. Definitely apply for the SBA. As Allison said, if you decide in 8 weeks or whenever you get the information you don't want it, you don't have to accept it, but it's better to get in the queue now than to not. What is interesting about the Paycheck Protection Loan Program is that parts of this will be forgiven. And the other thing they're saying is you can't use both of these loans for the same thing. So some of the advice we're giving to clients is use the Paycheck Protection Loan money specifically for payroll. Use the EIDL money for everything else. Now, every business is different. Believe me, we know every small business is different, and your situation may not warrant that. But generally speaking, this PPP program is designed for really that payroll information, that payroll costs. So, just that's important. And there's exceptions on here that I'm not going to read through now. You'll get these slides. But all of this information is on our website in detail, with Q&As and, answers to most of your questions. So I really want to encourage everybody, in a calmer moment, go to the website, click on that top link that gives you an overview, and a lot of this is all answered specifically. But right now, those are the two SBA-backed, government-backed loans that are available. Now there's third party, you know, whether EDFC or banks have other loans in addition to that is possible, and we're not going into the detail. But this, the only way you will be able to get to the PPP is through a lending institution. So that's it for me. I want to give plenty of time for the other presenters to speak, but I'll be on the call. I'll monitor the chat and the Q&A, and happy to answer questions and walk you through our website at the end of this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Marianne. I see some questions coming in, which we will address following our speakers. So right now I'd like to introduce Callie Dim. I'm sure most of you know Callie. She is the 5th generation innkeeper and owner of Little River Inn. So Callie, thank you.
Hi, good morning. Thank you. I just been asked to give an update on the Lodging Association and Visit Mendocino and what we're doing, just so we're all on the same page. The Mendocino County Lodging Association actually formed the bid back in 2006. We get 1% of the money. The TOT, also called the bed tax, goes to the county general fund. Way back when in 2006, the bid money all went to the Lodging Association. The 50-cent match that we get from the county went to the Promotional Alliance. Those two parent companies, organizations formed Visit Mendocino. So now all the money goes to Visit Mendocino for marketing. And the Lodging Association has just kind of been, I don't want to say defunct, but lazing around doing nothing. And when this crisis came up, it really didn't seem appropriate for Visit Mendocino, being a marketing organization, to be doing lobbying to the Board of Supervisors. So some of the old guard from the Lodging Association got together, including John Dixon, who's still the president, and we have submitted public expression to the Board of Supervisors for the last 2 weeks at their meetings asking for tax relief. Obviously, the supervisors are very busy doing other things right now. They're not thinking about the future so much. So we asked Travis at Visit Mendocino to contact Sherry Shatmeyer, the tax collector. He's very accustomed to working with her, and she has agreed to sponsor an agenda item for us for next week. So next week we will be on the agenda. We are focusing on just TOT at this point. I think a lot of other folks are dealing with property taxes and sales tax and things like that. So there will be a motion before the Board of Supervisors to give us relief on TOT. We don't have that perfected yet, but we do have to submit it by tomorrow, so it will be done. I think I'd like to look at the bright spots. I think the Lodging Association, before it was a marketing organization, it was just a membership organization of lodging people getting together and sharing ideas. And it's been extremely helpful for me, the people, the lodging owners that I've been working with, to get on the agenda, just sharing what we've been doing. And this is an opportunity to revamp MCLA more as perhaps a social club for us, or just a way to exchange ideas. So that's the bright news for the future. And that's it for me.
Thank you, Callie. Always nice to talk with you and see you. So our next speaker is Jim Roberts, who with his partner Brian Atkinson has the Madrones and the Brambles in Anderson Valley. They were poised to open a restaurant and retail outlet when this COVID-19 crisis hit. Jim was very much ahead of the curve. He already applied for an SBA loan, the EIDL loan. And so he's going to talk about his experience and in doing that. And of course, it's changed in that interim period. So he'll talk about his experience and give you some tips about what their experience was and things that you might consider. So Marianne, if we could please have that slide show back up. So Marianne, so Jim can talk to those slides. Thank you.
Perfect. So good morning, everybody. I'm sure we're all kind of going through the same thing and experiencing it in different ways, but you know, my property started out during 2008 in the economic disaster we had at that time, I was tied to the housing industry. I originally had kind of a design studio there, employees, and when this actually hit, I had to kind of reinvent myself. And so I guess I'm pretty good at, or I've gone through a few disasters like this. So once I kind of caught wind of what was going on, I decided to be really proactive. We kind of jokingly set up a war room, the week that we were going to be put down on mandatory shelter in place. And we went to work, first of all, with our lenders and talking to them, but I'll kind of go through some of the points that we addressed. And like we said, that we did go through this emergency injury relief loan right away. So here's a couple of websites that are up here that are basically ones that you can look at. And then actually there's some important numbers that are here too. So one is actually, once you get into your status of your application that's been filed, you're going to want to check on it. We haven't been able to check status online, which we should be able to. I don't know if that's changed, but we did just try yesterday. So we've had to call the 1-800 number in order to do that. And then if they've gone down a couple times, which I think the system's gotten better. So originally when we applied, you would have to email documents, and now you can also fax them too. So there's a fax number for you right here. Next slide. Some of the things that you're going to need to have on hand when you're actually going through and doing your application, and if you can get them ahead of time, is profit and loss information with monthly gross revenue. And here's the periods between February of 2019 to end of January of this year. And then the cost of goods for the same period of time. That's what your wholesale expenses for the same period. And then also your fixed expenses, which would be payroll, health insurance, retirement benefits, insurance, and that sort of thing. And that's part of kind of filling out the form. So, and then you need to complete the business information form, owner information. You will have to supply a financial statement, which is a personal financial statement. If you have a partner that's involved in this too, anyone that I think has more than 50% interest in the property will have to provide this. Then there's a 4506 form that you have to submit. And then it would be really beneficial if you actually have done your 2019 tax returns. And one of the things that is really important is they're going to be going through, and what I've been told, I have a good friend of mine that has an inn in Napa, and he's gone through the disaster relief twice. So I kind of got on the phone and talked to him. There was a couple forms that they did not tell us to submit. And then he also mentioned that forms that you fill out should really match your tax return information. So if not, you're going to be kind of put on hold and bumped to the back of the line, or just put on hold. And so if you're going through and you have those figures, just don't rely on your what you have in your QuickBooks accounts. Make sure that it matches that, because it will kind of flag your application as it goes through. This P-19 form and the 1368 were not requested for us to send in the original application. And as I've mentioned before, I think that that the whole process has changed a little bit. We applied, gosh, I think about a day or two after we went into shelter in place. So we got it in pretty early. It was the week before last. And so we went ahead and we just submitted these forms afterwards. On the P019 form, we called and got our status, and we were told that we did need to actually send this form in too. And I have another friend of mine that actually is applying, and they were told the same thing. So I think even though it may not ask for it in the beginning, I would download it, get it filled out, and then submit it with the rest of your documents. Next slide. So a few things that we've learned, I think, Alison's already gone over this before, but the terms that were quoted are 3.75. When we talked to an actual person, a representative last week to check on our status for our application, they said the going rate was 3.6. So we'll see if that actually happens or not. And then it's a 30-year amortization, 12 months grace period before the first payment is due. This is actually a really good loan. So for you that have got an SBA loan before, these rates are really good. So I would really encourage people to go and apply for this. And if you don't need the funds, then you don't have to exercise them, but it's a really good terms on this. And like I said earlier, make sure if you do have your 2019 tax returns, it's not required that you have them, but ours, we always kind of get together, and ours are filed by the end of February every year or beginning of March. And it's a good thing because they will be looking at those. I had identity theft about 3 or 4 months ago. So I had to go through, and my credit score went down about 200 and something points. I was in the mid to high 7s, and now I'm in the 5s. In the process of doing that, I've got it pretty much cleaned up, but I went ahead and froze all my credit reports so they couldn't be pulled. We were talking to the representative with the SBA about that too, and they said that it's important that you make sure that your credit reports are available and they are unfrozen, and this could even make it where they'll actually just deny your loan. So I would make sure that that's good and that's happening. I already talked about the P019 form and the 1368, but our application was tagged as incomplete because we didn't have these. So I would go ahead and just upload them anyway. Once your application is complete, it'll go to processing, and then it goes to a loan officer. So it's important to kind of check the status as this is going through. And if you can't do that online, you're looking at, having to make a phone call. Our first phone call we made, we were caller number 800 and something. And then when we got to caller 17, we got dropped. Then we called back and we go to caller 1200. And I think it took about an hour and a half to get through, but we eventually did get through to a live person. And if you don't know what your status is, it's just going to sit there. Next slide. And then we spoke a little bit earlier about the grant that actually is available too. And we need to check on this since we did apply early. I think Marianne had mentioned that we may need to reapply again just so that we can do this grant portion. But I would really encourage people to do that once you've applied for the other and put this in. It's a simple form. It went really quickly. It basically is a lot of the same information that you put on your original form. If you're denied the loan from the SBA, you will still receive this grant money, and it is money that is forgiven, and they ask for your checking account number, and it will be deposited into your account. I haven't heard of anyone yet that actually has gotten this, but we did go ahead and apply for this a few days ago. Another thing too, on the payment protection program that we talked about earlier, the PPP, which is part of the CARES Act, if you have an existing SBA 504 or 7 loan, these will not have to make payments for the next 6 months. So our lender on this went ahead and called us and let us know yesterday that they got the direction on this particular item, and basically our loan will be taken off of auto pay for that. We have 4 different mortgages. We have 2 on each of our properties. So on that particular portion of our loan, we won't be required to make payments for 6 months. Any interest, principal, and fees that occur during those times are going to be forgiven. Next slide. So I'm sure everybody's gone into a plan of kind of managing your cash flow. I started really early just because of the hardship I went through under the 2008. I mean, I was like we are now. I was in the one industry with housing that was hit the hardest, and at that time, there was no lifeline. There was no bridges that were given to anyone. The banks weren't working with us. It was a really difficult time, and I think I really learned from that. So when I saw this coming, I immediately kind of went back into the mode that I was familiar with doing and trying to get a hold of my cash flow, my resources, take a look at what funds I had available for myself. But the one really nice thing about this is that everybody's been willing to work with us. So this is, in a lot of ways, a completely different situation. It's nothing like what I went through in 2008. I know it's still a really difficult situation, but we've had some really good response. So the first thing I did is we ran kind of a monthly report of our operating costs, and we looked at the areas that we could cut expenses. So we started with our largest expenses first, and of course that's usually going to be your mortgage or rent payments, and then it's going to be your payroll. Unfortunately, I learned this before. So like many of you, we had to furlough our workers with the intention that we want to bring every single one of them back. We actually offered them assistance in helping them with applying for unemployment. And then we went to our lenders next, which were wonderful. At least the ones we have, with working with us, and immediately got on it. I even had a phone call on a Sunday saying that they were working on our loans and our deferment plans, and all of those loans have been deferred. So I would actually even take, if you have a line of credit or any other type of loan too, I think having a conversation is really important with those people that you work with and that you have the relationships with. The next thing we did is we took our monthly payments that we felt we needed to have some control over, and we took them off of auto pay with our banks. Basically our utilities and phone and you know, cable, and those we just we kept on. We got an idea of what those costs were going to be every month. We took a look at our reserves and realized that you know, the pain of having to take those off and put them back on wasn't really worth it, and those are necessities that we're going to need. So we went ahead and just went through and did that. One thing we did is we have, between the two properties, I've got, I think 6 or 7 meters. So I went ahead and shut off a few of the meters. Brian and I went out and we took a look at the areas that we didn't really need to have any power for, and just as another precaution and another way to kind of control costs that are going out. So we went ahead and shut those meters down. Then with our bookkeeper, who's been wonderful with us on this, she's really worked with us on getting the figures that we need. I went back to a plan that I had whenever cash flow was really tight with my previous business. And when we go through and we do our accounting on a weekly basis, I went ahead and had her run a aging payables report, and so that we could review them together and make a priority of the things that needed to be paid on a weekly basis, and see what was, you know, aging, what was still current, what we need to get on top of. And then I think a really good thing to do is, if you feel you're going to be late on any of your payments, is to reach out to your people that you owe money to or that you have a payment due to. I think that this is a really good practice, and then letting them know the situation you're in, what you're trying to do. They'll usually make notations, and will be very appreciative and willing to work with you more if you take a proactive role in letting them know that you think you're going to be late. Next slide. The next thing we did is we actually, our insurance policy, like many of you, is really high. So we went ahead and we contacted our insurance agent. I knew that we had a clause in there that had to do with interruption of business. Like the problem with most insurance agencies is they've done a workaround on almost anything that can go wrong. And most of them have a clause that was done in 2006 that excludes anything regarding disasters due to viruses. So we really couldn't do much about that, but we did reach out to our agent again, and she's going to go ahead and contact our provider to see what, since we are not functioning as a business right now, what we can do on our liability payments, and see if those could either be put on hold, or if there's something that we could do to actually have some type of forgiveness, or even work out a payment plan on those. And I think for me, that's just about it.
Thank you, Jim. I know we put this slide in the Payroll Protection Plan, PPP. We have talked about this quite a bit right now, but we'll still keep this in the slide deck that will come to you about 24 hours after we finish this presentation. Amaret will send out a link to the slide deck so you can review everything. So our next speaker is Scott Schneider, and Scott has Silver Bright Consulting, which is a human resource development and management agency. He also does organizational development and much more. In addition to that, Scott is currently the manager at the Noyo Harbor Inn in Fort Bragg. So Scott is going to talk about some human resource issues. So thanks, Scott. Take it away.
Great. Sound check. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I'll turn that to yes. Great. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's nice to see some of you I haven't seen in a long time. I'm going to talk a little bit about HR, a little bit of history. I got my HR start with Jeff at the Stanford Inn back in 2000, managed a couple of B&Bs in Elk for a while, managed Visit Mendocino, and had a 4-year stint as HR director at the city of Fort Bragg. And obviously now doing it for here and consulting for others. And very sticky situation with employees right now. I put together a few slides. HR is such a individual specific topic that I assume there will be individual questions about you know, a certain situation or a certain group of employees. And so either ask at the end or feel free to reach out to me and I can do what I can. My last slide that you'll see is a list of websites, resources that you can go to get some of the latest answers. So I thought I'd just kind of put together a few of the most common questions and answers that I'm seeing out there. And first, I know a lot of you don't currently have employees, but some of you might. And so, you know, the question is, people are not feeling safe, either at their workplace or being around other people. And so just, you know, some quick Q&As. Yes, normally you can ask employees about their health, but you can now, but you need to be reasonable. You can ask about their symptoms, but you can only ask COVID-19 specific symptom questions. Again, be reasonable. And if you do it for one who is not healthy, you need to do it for all. Just a good HR rule in general. You can make an employee stay home who has a family member who's sick. Of course, you're not going to know if they have a family member who's sick unless they've said something. So obvious question, can you ask an employee if their family members are sick? I don't have a specific answer for that, but I think as long as you're being reasonable and looking out for the health and protection of yourself and your other employees, then that is a reasonable question to ask. If you do have an employee, and this is more, I don't know how much of the hospitality industry this is, but I'm a part of a law firm that works with public agencies, and we're seeing a lot of that now with public safety officers and healthcare employees. You can make an employee come to work if they are essential to your business, as long as they don't have a regular accommodation that would require them not to come to work. One in this instance is age. I know that you can't, there's a lot of questions and answers going out there. I'm sure there'll be lawsuits later on. Some employees are making their people who are over 65 come to work, and some are not. And so that's kind of a yet to be determined. I think as in all HR issues, it's just good to be sensitive and good to try and take care of your employees as best you can, while also looking out for your business. So next slide. So a lot of confusion about, you know, what is happening to my employees. Some general definitions. Furlough generally is when someone has a reduction in hours or is not needed for a very limited time, and usually they know when they're coming back. With furloughing employees, you must retain any benefits that they've had when they were furloughed. And so if you have furloughed your employees, just keep that in mind. Temporary layoff, generally it's a layoff that is going to be less than 6 months, but you have full intention of rehiring those people. And so if you have not officially sent out change in relationship forms, which I'll get to in a second, temporary layoff is kind of what's recommended right now because we don't know how long this is going to last, but gosh, hopefully not more than 6 months. Also, temporary layoffs, you do not have to retain benefits. And then, of course, there's permanent layoff. And a permanent layoff is when you get rid of a position and there's no real intention of rehiring that person or rehiring for that position. One of the changes the CARES Act makes is all of these are eligible for unemployment. And I'm sure you've seen that the federal government is going to increase the weekly maximum by $600. So California, currently the weekly maximum is $1,050 per week. And you should, if you have not done this already, send out change in relationship forms for each of your employees. It's no longer at the workplace. Very simple form. You can Google, a standardized form and find it online. If I can send you one, whatever. But you just want to specify the what, when, and why the change is occurring. And that is what they can use for applying for unemployment. It essentially says the last day they worked, why they're no longer at work, and when, if we know when they're intended to come back, if and when they're intended to be rehired. All right, next slide. So do I have to pay my employees? So a lot of people are still paying their employees just because they want to take care of their employees as best they can, and a lot of businesses can't afford it. And so there's a difference really between having salaried and hourly employees. As you can imagine, hourly employees, you only pay them for the hours worked. So that's not really a big issue. But if you are having employees work from home, whether they're researching or whether they're, doing that Excel project that you've been wanting to do for 15 years that now you have time to do, make sure that they are tracking their hours and that you are paying them on a regular payroll schedule. Unless you've made other arrangements, and if you have, I would recommend those arrangements be in writing. The tricky part is when you have salaried employees. If an employee works at all during a work week, you must pay them for the entire week. You can deduct full day pay if there really is no work, or if they don't come into work, or if they don't work from home. And they need to be able to use any sick leave that they have to make up for those days that they may miss during a week. And there are no partial day deductions allowed. So if you have a salaried employee, hopefully they're not taking advantage of you. They make a phone call for 10 minutes. They come in to grab, some lotion that they left behind. I mean, that's all. We're getting real finicky, but technically you have to pay them for a full day for that. Hopefully employees are not, they're being considerate of the business during this time. You can reclassify employees from salary to hourly, but it should not be a temporary reclassification, and it can't be retroactive. And so if you reclassify, you should do it at the end of a pay period to have it be effective the following start of the pay period. Some other questions that I've seen: if I've laid off or furloughed my employees, are they eligible for the emergency sick pay? No, they're not. They are not currently working, so they are not eligible for the emergency sick pay. Of course, an exception to that would be if you have a salaried employee, and they are currently not laid off or furloughed, and they're kind of doing random work from time to time. They are, I believe, I'm just going to put that out there, eligible for the 2 weeks. It's kind of case-by-case basis from what I've seen. But again, like it says, they have to be in active working status. Okay, next slide. I think this is just my resources.
Marianne?
Did I lose you? Oh, there we go. So these are just some websites, and I do want to kind of put a huge pat on the back to Marianne and everyone at the West Center. Your COVID resource page is amazing. I have sent out some of the restaurant worker grant stuff to the restaurant employees here, and they've been super grateful. I don't know of anyone that's actually received money yet, but they've all been applying. They've heard back from some of these nonprofit organizations, and so it's been really, really helpful. I normally don't advocate for organizations. California Chamber of Commerce is doing an amazing job. They have an HR where I got a lot of this information. They have a HR portal that it does cost extra, but I have found is well worth it. If you do have a restaurant, the California Restaurant Association is doing an amazing job as well. keeping restaurants informed, up to date, with all the latest and greatest. And I haven't had any experience with CHLA or CABI, so if anyone else has, I found their pages not to be as up to date, but I'm sure that other people have used their resources. Again, the SBA one at the bottom is for your loans that have been talked about. And the Department of Labor website I have found is actually really up to date and relevant and has some fresh information. So that's it for me. Again, happy to answer general questions, or if you have any specific situations you're concerned about, feel free to reach out at any time. And stay well and be healthy out there.
Thank you, Scott. So we do have some questions that came in ahead of time. I'm going to read those and ask our panelists, probably Marianne would have the most relevant information, relevant answers to respond to these. So I'm going to kick off.
Alison?
Yes.
Alison, before we start, what I'm going to do is, while you're reading out the questions, just to let everybody know, I'm going to call up our website and point out some of the different areas that people can go. Many of the speakers spoke about, specific things, and so they are available actually right on our website. So while you're reading out the questions, I just wanted to highlight that if you go to our main page, it's right here in the upper top bar on how to do business in the age of coronavirus. And this is the resource page. So all of these are hyperlinks. And you can see I start from the top with the federal and state agency information. But as you scroll down here, there's HR links. So some of the, like this is a notice that Scott had mentioned about the change in relationship. Mm-hmm. The form is right here. There's some things for hospitality workers that we have found and we've put up. So I go through this pretty much every day to try to update it. And on the right-hand side, we try to keep people informed with webinars and such. But, clicking on simple links like this will give you actual information coming out of federal agencies that have Q&As. So anything that you might have wanted to take a second look at from what was discussed today, you can go to this site and get that information. So go ahead, Alison. I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Marianne. Yes, and I'll echo Scott. It's a great resource, and we'll have a lot of your questions can be answered by going to that particular website or picking up the phone and calling one of the West Center team. So I'm going to start with a question from the Westport Inn. And the question, there's two questions. As sole proprietors with no employees, are we eligible for a small business loan? And what are the restrictions with the loan? That is allowables or exclusions. And Marianne, is this something you can respond to?
Yes, sole proprietors are now, that was one of the extensions that happened with the CARES Act. And so there are no restrictions. It's the same for everybody, whether you're a sole proprietor, S Corp, any number of, limited partnership, it's all the same. So yes, go to the same site, apply in the same way.
Thank you. Do SBA loans require any collateral?
So for these new ones, for the EIDL loans, no, they do require, and I think James did a great job explaining some of the required form and information, but especially for what I was told under 25,000, they were letting a lot, they didn't have as much restrictions of details, but it's very, very, very flexible. And I think James did a good job in his opening talking about the different forms and requirements. And again, you could see that on the Q&A form.
Great, thank you, Marianne. This is kind of a four-part question here. If we close Big Bend Lodge for the 2 months of May and June, will we will we be able to recoup the losses from refunds that we give to reservations on the books? I'm going to continue. The loans being given are based on the impacts that a business suffers up until June 30th. Is that correct? What does a business owner need to do to get a loan forgiven? And are lodges, hotels, etc., going to be able to show financial hardship to the business based on previous year's income? And I think most of these questions have been responded to today, but Marianne, if you'd like to make any comments.
Well, I also invite the other panelists to speak based on their expressions. One thing I do know that was told over and over again when we were in some training programs was it's important to be able to show like January through March of last year and January through March of this year. Like they're looking for that kind of understanding about how it has dropped off. So just something to consider.
Callie, actually that brings up something that we discussed was dealing with reservations and refunds. I don't know if you feel you want to give some idea of how the Little River Inn is dealing with this at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this was one of the great things about just our little discussion group working on the TOT agenda item. We were all doing different things. So I think most of us at the beginning were giving away refunds. And then when, to use John Dixon's term, that became a bloodbath. We stopped doing that and asked people to take either gift cards or just to keep their deposit on their account. For me, anyway, that worked for a few days. And then on March 20th, people said, no, I want my money. And fairly soon after that, I know me and a lot of others have just stopped giving refunds. We've just said, I'm sorry, we're not unable to at this time. And we will be our guests will be our first priority once we reopen to get those refunds to them. A lot of them are leaving them on the account though. Most people are being pretty understanding.
And we kind of had a similar experience too. We also do events. So we had a few events that canceled, and on those events, one was a kind of a high-end yoga retreat that we had. That was on the first week, just really right after we went in shelter in place. And that we moved to next year. So everything, reservations, all that went to next year. We had another kind of rehearsal for a wedding that was going on. None of our weddings have rescheduled yet. That also went to next year, and we did the same thing Callie did. At first, we were starting to refund people, and we used the same words, bloodbath. It was horrible, and there was a lot of people that were really understanding. And with those, we offered the gift certificates again. And then for those that really pushed and wanted that refund, we went ahead and said that we would need at least 60 days to review things that we're reorganizing, and that we would actually get back to them in 60 days. And our hope is that at that time, when we do get back to them, maybe some of those also may want to rebook, at that time with the atmosphere. I'm optimistic of hoping that the atmosphere will be different. So yeah, ours was a very similar experience. And it's one thing to have not a single reservation coming in, that's no income, and another to claw back into any little bit of reserves you have over a winter, slow season. And with us trying to open up 2 businesses, and it just wasn't possible. So, but for the most part, there's 2% that have not been very understanding, but the rest have.
And if I could jump back in, just another little idea that was brought up is to take advanced reservations, at least for me right now, through June without a deposit. And then anything after June, I am getting a deposit on.
Got it.
Thanks for those ideas, Callie and Jim. So this is one other question, and I don't think we have the answer to this, but we will look into it. This is from a former innkeeper who sold their inn, and they're carrying the note on the property. The note is amortized over 30 years, and the borrowers have been paying it every month, but the former innkeeper is now concerned about that going forward. does West have any advice for this particular person? They've been getting all kinds of announcements of what the feds are doing with the banks, but nothing specific for that situation. So any advice, Marianne, or any of our panelists?
Say the opening again, Allison.
Okay, so this is a former innkeeper. They sold their inn and are carrying the note on the property, which is amortized over 30 years with a balloon payment at 5 years. So they're just concerned about how that will, how any emergency assistance might affect them or their borrowers.
I would just say I would first reach back to the person that they have the note with and start a dialogue there. I don't know if that's already happened or not, but that's one thing I would start with. I know that when we found out that we were going to get some forgiveness on our loans and our mortgage payments, we have 3 or 4 tenants that are on the property, have several tasting rooms on the property, and I reached out to them immediately. So that was kind of the week of our shelter in place. Once I had a good feel for that, because I wanted to retain those folks. I knew that they would maybe also be sharing in the same type of hardship, and wanted to at least start a dialogue, even though that would maybe be the only income that we have coming in. I think it's important that, we're kind of all in this together. So, from a human point, I would say I would reach back and see if you can have a dialogue with that person first.
Thanks.
Yeah, I would agree definitely with what James is saying, because, when this initially happened, like that first week after the 14th, we spent most of our time dealing and talking with clients about cash flow. And that was the first thing we said: go back to everybody, credit card, nobody is too big that you shouldn't reach out and ask for, forgiveness, delay, whatever it is you need to, because this is a global situation. This is not just our little community suffering. So, so everybody's in the same straits. So that would be my first line.
Okay, thank you for that advice. I think right now, Amaret, let's go to the Q&A and chat. Do you want me to read these out, or would I can certainly do that?
Oh, yeah, whatever you want.
Okay, so I'll start with the Q&A. And here's a question: if I've already laid off the staff of my facility, can I apply for a loan or grant to rehire them? If I rehire, can I rehire in different positions? Maintenance instead of guest services, for example. Scott, maybe that's one you can field. Scott? Okay, Scott's MIA.
Yeah, no, I'm here. I was dealing with, sorry, what was the question?
If I have already laid off the staff of my facility, can I apply for a loan or grant to rehire them? And if I rehire, can I rehire for different positions? For example, maintenance instead of guest services.
The short answer is yes. You can, if you have work for employees to do, payroll is, that's obviously one of the main points of the CARES Act. So they are really encouraging people to keep employees working. And so even if you've laid them off, bring them back. I'm not sure what kind of record keeping, I don't know if anyone's sure what kind of record keeping is needed at the moment, but yes.
Great.
And I actually, when we were in the middle of this too, my bookkeeper kind of reached out to me too, because we kind of had the same question. I was going back and forth with her, not in regards to the disaster relief loan, but to the paycheck protection plan, the PPP. And since we did have to furlough our employees, but I guess if that was done prior to this, we need to find that out. But that you still may be eligible for that too, which is where you will get some forgiveness if you bring people back in for, I think, a period of at least 8 weeks or so. And then I have another bookkeeper accountant that actually is one that applied for the EIDL for several of our clients. She has one that's going to fund this Friday. She was in a few days before us in the application process, so these loans are getting funded already. And she had sent me the link to the application for the PPP. I know that that's just going to have to go through a lender, but I guess the Treasury Department has actually put up something in regards to that just as of today, and she's been very proactive. So I think I'll share that with Marianne too, and maybe the West Center can take a look at that and see if that's something that folks can maybe at least get an idea of what's going to be required.
Great.
Yes, I just want to add here that, you know, it literally is changing all the time. So last night I updated, and then I had all these appointments this morning, and then people have been sending me emails like, you need to update, new stuff has come out. And I'm like, there's not enough time to actually get it. So please share that with me. I am going to be putting stuff up and working on that this afternoon because the PPP stuff just really finally came out. And I know April 3rd is when they said the banks were going to be announcing it, but obviously it's even happening sooner.
Right. And I think sorry.
Can I just make one comment before I forget about the PPP that I heard again in some of these conversations that we're having with state and federal agencies? It feels like because it's going through these lending institutions, there's not as much money being put into the PPP. So get your loan, get your applications in sooner rather than later. There's more money being put into the SBA pot than into the PPP. I mean, it's a lot. It sounds like a great big amount of money, but it's the entire nation. So just keep that, you know, perspective. So I just wanted to share that.
Thanks, Marianne. I think this underscores the real fluidity of this whole situation, in that everything is changing so rapidly. And that's why I think if you haven't, just bookmark that coronavirus page for the westcenter.org website, because as Marianne said, that's updated on a really regular basis as soon as we get more information. So a question was about the initial shelter-in-place order that was meant to expire April 7th. Marianne has just posted that the federal government has extended that order to April 30th, and Governor Newsom is in fact in a press conference right now, and I imagine that that's one of the issues that he is addressing. So those were questions that were in the Q&A. I'm going to quickly look at what's in our webinar chat here. From Samir, he says, this is again a PPP question. If we rehire, how would that work? Should we rehire even if the businesses are closed? Well, I don't think, Marianne, I'll defer to you on this, or Scott, but I don't think that people can go back to work while the shelter-in-place order is in effect. And I think that's where these this reassessment of employment comes in. Scott, do you have any ideas on this one?
He's left the room again.
He has left the room again. He's out doing something.
I had a question on that too. I mean, we were kind of thinking that also. I know that in reading through the order, that is a mandate for our county, which kind of follows the others with our surrounding counties in San Francisco, is that if there is necessary maintenance that needs to be done to a property, so that to keep it, you know, as for public safety or health and that sort of thing. I'm wondering if, I'm thinking that work can still kind of go on. So it's maintenance, repairs, anything that falls into that bracket. But I think that would be a really good question for our supervisors. You know, so if we need to have some of that stuff done to our properties, can we, and our staff actually is fairly multifaceted in their skill set. So they could still do some of those things as long as they were practicing social distancing and hygiene and the things that are required in order to do that. But yeah, I don't know if Marianne has any better information on that.
So, again, I've been attending so many different things. I think I have heard that that is the case, that can be done. But what I'm going to direct everybody to is the county website on COVID, and I'm going to put the link in the chat in a second. There's also a hotline to ask that question that specific question. But I do think that's listed under here under different health order directives. So I would say start there first and then put the, call the number. It's 707-234-6052. And I'll put both the link and the call number in the chat.
Thanks, Marianne. So here's a question, Callie, for you from Mark at the Point Arena Lighthouse. What is the Lodging Association specifically going to ask the Board of Supervisors to do relative to TOT?
Well, I will be writing that proposal when I get off this call here. But I think we're going to ask for 90 days without penalties, and also suggest that they allow us to pay a month at a time to find some kind of balance between the county needs and the lodging needs.
Great, thank you. Amaret.
If I may just interject, this is Scott. So the city of Fort Bragg, just so Callie, you can, if it matters, is holding off all payments till July 1st. And that includes February TOT that was due yesterday.
Yeah, I saw that. So, yeah, we were definitely going to hold Fort Bragg up as an example.
Yeah, that's great. I think, part of it too, I think I suggested too, like you said, Callie, is that if they, I know that's such valuable money for the county and they're going to be hurting right now, but I hope that hopefully they can reach out to the state and the feds in order to help themselves with that, is that, part of this whole thing is to be able to get things kind of put at bay. But I'm also concerned as an owner, as sure as many other people are, is once we do get back up and running, we don't want to be in a deeper hole than we possibly could be. So we still paid our property taxes, and even though they were going to be able to be put off and that sort of thing, just because I don't want to come out of this in a couple months and have all this stuff kind of be put down the road and have to have this huge amount of debt in order to recover. So a payment plan would be really nice if they even considered maybe, giving a grace period on that and then coming up with something, because I think a lot of lodging owners in the county are really going to need that assistance in order to kind of spread this over a period of time.
Yeah, and just to add on to that initial question from Mark, he suggests that if people are lodging essential personnel during the shelter in place, that they not be liable to pay TOT on those reservations. So Callie, maybe that's something you could also consider including in the request to the county.
Sure, that's a great idea.
Yeah, I think that's a splendid idea. Amaret, perhaps we could do some raise your hands so we get people actually verbalizing their questions in real time.
Yeah, of course. And I was also going to see if the panelists would show their video for us in this time so we can see everyone while people are asking questions. And go ahead and raise your hand if you would like to, if we haven't gotten your question answered yet and you would like to speak with us. And I can go ahead and change your settings to allow you to speak and show your video if you'd like. And we don't have anyone raising their hand yet, just letting you know. So I'm gonna, okay, we have Simmer. I hope I'm saying that right. Okay, go ahead.
Samir, you need to unmute yourself.
Okay, now can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. A question, I noticed something in the chat where someone was recommending Redwood Credit Union and I think West Bank. Are there other lenders that you're aware of that are doing the PPP that have capacity? And the reason I ask about that is we've reached out to several different SBA lenders who are listed as lenders who are going to be participating, and we simply haven't heard back from anybody. And I get that there's, that they're all dealing with capacity issues, but if you've got a list or those that have somehow communicated that they're happy to take in new clients. I'd love to hear that.
So I'll take this one. I do not have a list yet, but we're working on that, and I know that they are, they meaning the SBDCs for our region, are trying to gather a regional list. So like if there aren't lenders in our county, for instance, you can go to lenders in other counties. Again, this just came out today with a lot of banks and lending institutions were waiting until the actual regulations came out before they decided whether they were going to take this on or not. A challenge for the banks to take this on. It's not, you know, it's not this isn't an SBA loan. It's not direct like that. So there is some complications with it. But I would say in the next 24 hours, you're probably going to have a list. I'm just about to post now some of the SBA regulations around the PPP, but as soon as I get that list, I'll put it up. The thing about the Redwood Credit Union that I put in the chat, by the way, and again, I put up a week ago, so something could have changed, but it is still on their site. They were doing 0% loan for $5,000K, and they had financial assistance. Now there may be caveats with that, but it is on their site, and this was specifically for their own clients, people who were already in the Redwood Credit Union. So that was the only one I did.
Yeah, we're with Redwood Credit Union, and I understand we've been in direct contact with our people there, and they've been working really hard for us, but I'm not sure if they're taking on new clients or not. I heard that maybe they weren't with the PPP, and I heard that Savings Bank, which I was with for 25 years, wasn't, but I think Callie, you mentioned Savings Bank is doing that.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Amaret, any other questions in the?
I don't see any other hands raised. If you would like to speak with the panelists or to everyone, you please raise your hand. We did get a couple more in the Q&A box. That one was to Marianne directly. So I'm going to go over to the chat. One question from Ian. Can you apply to host essential workers? And two, are there vouchers for homeless? And how does that work? Can you speak to that, anyone?
You know, I know for us as an Inn, we haven't really had a lot of communication with I think the Board of Supervisors have been really, besides just putting out their mandate, have been very tied up in just the health concerns with this. And there was a lot of things going around really kind of encouraging all the inns and all the hospitality places to just close down. So, I know that it does, you know, Callie, you can probably talk to this too, but I know that actually the mandate does actually allow for essential workers to be put up in hotels. But I'm not sure. It's almost, it feels like, to me, it feels like a double-edged sword because the community has been so kind of up in arms about the whole thing, you know, and I think even I've seen a few inns that have just really gotten a backlash. And I mean, we closed before the shelter in place, but I think it's been kind of terrible really on some of them, you know, how they've been treated. So do you know any more about that, Callie, yourself?
No, I don't. And yeah, it is a double-edged sword. People are getting really bashed on Facebook if they're renting at all.
Yep. So just a little update from Mark at Point Arena here. He has asked the county if they were maintaining a list of lodging places that would put up essential workers, and they do not have one at present. So it seems that would come under county jurisdiction, but again, there is this sort of backlash in the greater community about bringing anyone here.
Well, I will tell you, you know, being in Fort Bragg and being walking distance to the hospital and clinics, we've been contacted and we are hosting at severely reduced rates, occasionally a nurse or a doctor that are coming to help. And the city is also, they have workers that are coming. I know there are places in Fort Bragg that are hosting some of those workers. But if you are interested, I would recommend contacting those essential businesses directly kind of in your area and letting them know that if you want to host essential workers, that you're available to do so, because these people do need to stay somewhere.
Right. Thanks, Scott. Emma, any other questions?
Not that I'm seeing hands raised. Again, if you would like to ask any questions, or if there's any questions we have missed and you would like to let us know, please raise your hand. We did get a comment from Mark again. We are doing the same thing at the Lighthouse. A doctor coming in to work at Redwood Coast Medical Services will be staying with us. Again, if you have any questions, raise your hand. Still checking.
A couple of things while we're waiting, if there's other questions. We are hosting a whole series of webinars through the month of April. More will be coming online. We have them posted to our website. We're doing one on April 7th that's going to be really about finances. So for any of you who are feeling unsure about how to collect information for these loans, or need help in, a P&L, or, any aspect of this, you might want to jump onto that webinar and, ask specific questions. We are also going to be, for the Latino community and stuff, we're doing a whole series of Spanish, solely Spanish-speaking webinars. So for those of you who may know others who are in situations similar or slightly different than yours, who are in small business, those programs will be launching April 21st.
And I also wanted to mention Community First Credit Union is offering to their members personal loans. They don't do business loans, but $1,200, 0% interest for 12 months. So if any of you or any of your employees are members of Community First, that's an option for them.
Thanks, Scott. I'm just looking back through questions in the chat here. One from Sandra. I asked if my loan payments could be added onto the end of my loan. I'm not sure what that refers to, so if you could clarify that, we would be happy to answer that.
Well, that's what Savings Bank I know is doing for us. So we don't pay for 6 months, and instead of having to play catch up, they're just going to tack those 6 months to the end of the loan.
Got it. Thank you.
We had the same experience too. Yep.
This one from Ian. If you apply for $25,000 or less for the EIDL and realize later that you need additional funds, can you reapply, or do you get one shot at this funding?
Reapply. You can apply again. If you get declined, even, I suggest they will tell you why you got declined, and you correct that and you reapply. So we want people to keep applying.
Good, thank you. Anything? Is there any other topics that we haven't covered today that you would like us to see? You'd like to see us cover in any future webinars? We kind of anticipate that this is the first of several that we'll be doing that is lodging specific or hospitality specific. So we want to make sure that we cover your concerns and come armed with question, for next time.
We have a question or comment from John Dixon. Go ahead, you can unmute yourself. John, can you unmute yourself? Seem to be having some technical difficulties. Hold on one second. And John, oh, where'd you go? There's you. Do you want to try now? And speaking with your mic, you can unmute by pressing there you go.
Okay. Yeah, hi. So my question is, can you hear me?
Yep.
So the question is, I don't remember where I saw this, but the CARES Act was the third thing to pass. And what I heard when that happened is that there's a fourth bill that's going to come out, supposedly, not anytime soon necessarily, but is specific to lodging. At least it was talked about end of last week or so. Is that something anybody knows about at the West Center, or sort of further? I mean, this one's just rolling out, obviously, but and things are changing every day. But is anything else coming down the pike, I guess, is the question that anybody knows about.
Yes, there are two more. There's a phase 4 and 5 that is being discussed. It's going to be around homeowners and renters. It's going to obviously be focused on strengthening the social safety net. I don't have the details on it. They did mention it, that there were other phases of this coming out. Right now, I'm not aware of how much phase 4 is focused on business. I just don't know that yet. But I'm sure they'll be telling us as soon as they know that it's closer. I just don't have any details of it.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions? You may raise your hand at this point and I can unmute you. Anyone going once?
I actually have another comment that's kind of different but related. I'm keenly aware these days about federal and state funding and what it does for all of us, and certainly from the work that we've been doing and how it helps businesses. I just want to put in a plug for everybody to please remember to do the census and to tell all your friends and family to do the census, because that's just as important. I mean, if we can show that our population has grown, we will get more funds. If we can show certain things in our population are happening differently, the county will get more funds. And, in light of this pandemic and we see the need for funds, I just want to remind everybody, because the census, for many of us, might have fallen through the cracks, but it's really important to do it. So.
Thanks for that reminder, Marianne. I think we are at the end of this particular conversation. I hope you've found it helpful, and I really encourage you to go to westcenter.org to sign up, speak to somebody, get help and guidance. That's what West Center is there for. Thank you very much.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say we have one more person raising their hand. We have
Absolutely.
time. I'm going to change your settings right now and allow to talk, but I'm also going to start a quick webinar poll. This is just to get feedback from the audience about the webinar today. So I'll be launching that at the same time, and people can just answer the questions on their screen. So hold on one second while I get her set up. Okay, go ahead. You should be allowed to unmute yourself at this time. There you go.
Hi, Joe.
Hi. Boy, all of a sudden got much better than it was. A question came up. If you are, Callie was talking about not having them collect TOT, but if you are renting to essential workers and you are collecting TOT and bid, then you're obligated to pay that to the county. So don't not collect it until you know they're not going to want it. And then if you do collect it, you'll still have to pay it.
Right.
Or give it back to the guest.
Pardon me?
Or give it back to the guest, perhaps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good idea, Kelly.
Okay. I think, Amaret, is there anything else outstanding?
I don't see anything. I do have the poll up, and if you guys wouldn't mind just taking a second to leave us some feedback for today's webinar. We really appreciate that. And again, thank you for joining us today. You can find all of our information on our westcenter.org website. And again, if you have any questions, you could reach out to us. And that's all I have, Allison.
Thank you, Amaret. Thank you, our panelists, Scott, Callie, Jim, for participating today. I think it hopefully sheds some light on some of the pressing issues that lodging and hospitality is facing. And West will be back in touch with you. We'll have a recording of the webinar today and also the slideshow, so for your reference. I can only say it one more time. Please contact westcenter.org for information and guidance. That's what they're here to do. So thank you all for participating, and hope to see you in person before too long.
Hang in there, everybody.
Yeah, stay well.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.